Hi there, this is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video, we're discussing The Ritual, written by Adam Nevill. It's a horror. It was recommended to me in a comment by Apollonius Beatsman, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's a movie as well, and I think it's on Netflix, but I haven't seen the movie yet. Book-wise, look, it's an okay book. It's a bit of a mixed bag. I loved the first part. So this book is in two sections. The first section was brilliant. The second section is a bit of a mixed bag. Some parts are good, some parts not so good. But overall, it's a pretty good book, and I did enjoy the read. The story is structured in two parts. Part 1 does lead into part 2. For me, I enjoyed part 1 the most. In the first part, we have 4 friends, and they're going on a hiking holiday in the Scandinavian forest. Moral of the story, so moral number 1, don't go hiking. It's bad for your health. Just stay home, have a holiday somewhere else if you want to, not in the woods. The 4 friends are hiking, and apart from a twisted knee, apart from blisters, which 2 of the characters do suffer from early on in this section of the story, there are other things you have to worry about. So moral of the story 2, don't go off trail. Whatever you do, don't go off trail in the forest. Even if you think you're lost, going off trail is just a bad idea. You may think it's a shortcut, don't go off trail. The 4 friends do go off trail, and that leads them into just disaster really, and that's the whole part of this first section. I enjoyed this section very much. You've got a threat in the woods that you really can't see. You think it's out there, you don't know where it is, but it's dangerous. You don't know how big it is. You assume it's big because of what you see in the forest. So when they're walking in the forest off trail, so they go off trail because they want to do a shortcut, and the reason for that is one of the guys has got a twisted knee, one's got blisters. They think if they go on a shortcut, will cut their hike by at least a day, so they can get home and to safety earlier. As they're walking through this forest, the forest is getting denser and denser, and they can't find the trail basically. They're walking along and the forest cuts them off, so they're constantly changing directions. And in this section, the author language, the way the author wrote this, is just really amazing, to be honest. You feel like you're there. You feel like you can see the forest. You feel like you're in the forest with these characters. You can feel everything they're feeling. You feel their discomfort of being where they are. You feel their anxiety, because as the story goes on in this section, their anxiety ramps up just because of what's happening. You feel at times their fear. You just feel their whole confusion with what's going on as well in this forest. And when they come across certain things in the forest, so as they're walking along, the first thing they come across that's strange is a carcass of an animal strung up very high in a tree. What could actually get up there and put this animal carcass so high in a tree? That's the first thing they've got to work out. And that's the first thing that causes them to have anxiety and fear and confusion really, because they don't know what's out there. They continue walking on though, and that leads them to a house. And this house from the outside is very old. When they get inside, that's when the whole creepiness factor of this story just gets amped up. You know, if you're on a dial from 0 to 10, in this house, which is about quarter of the way, third of the way through the first section, amps up to 10. And you can really feel everything that the characters are feeling. You see what they're seeing. You feel like you're in that house with them, that old house. All this creepy stuff on the walls, all these creepy things going on in the house. And what's upstairs? There's some things upstairs as well, which I won't go into, but that adds to the creepiness factor as well. So the author in this section did an amazing job in bringing that creepiness factor in and amping up that fear and anxiety from the character's point of view. I don't want to mention too much about the first section, because if I do, it'll give away those twists, those shock moments that happen. And if you read this, you want to feel those for yourself. And I'm actually glad I read this before I go and watch the movie. I do want to watch the movie now, but I'm glad I read the book first, because the book is so descriptive, the book's so powerful. The last thing I'll mention really in the plot about the first section is when they're in the house, they all have a moment. And the moment is they're all asleep, but they all have a vision. They're all dreaming about something when they're asleep. And it seems their dreams are different, but they're somehow linked as well. And they wake up and find themselves in different parts of the house, some outside, some inside. But it's just a very powerful moment because they're all very, very scared from those dreams. You can just feel the fear of these characters. It's coming out of the pages. It's so strong. And it just sends shivers up your spine because you're just reliving it with them. When they have those dreams, you see what they're dreaming, but you're also living it with them, and you're living with their anxiety, confusion, fear from that moment on. And from that moment on, other big things happen in that first section, and they're very powerful. It's quite fast-paced, even though it's very detailed. From this first section, it's not a slow pace. It's quite fast-paced, and that's unusual for the setting of this first section being the thick forest, and they're hiking through this thick forest. You would think there'd be a bit of a slow pace going on in the book, in the story, but it's not. It feels like a fast pace. You turn those pages so quickly because you want to see what happens next. You want to see who's going to be okay. You want to know what's going on in the forest, what this thing is that they think's out there, because you just have a feeling of something out there. This first section reminded me of Bird Box. And I don't know if you've ever read Bird Box, but Bird Box, part of it is, the main character, Mallory, is out with two kids on a river in a canoe, and they have fear about, what's out there, what could be out there hunting them if they open their eyes and look. But the fear in those sections wasn't as great as the fear in this book. This author who wrote The Ritual was able to craft and create that fear in the book so amazingly. It just knocks the pants off Bird Box. Bird Box is very poor in comparison. Then we move into the second part of this story, which is not as good as part one. The second part is titled South of Heaven. And the start of this second part, where things are a bit hazy, you're not sure what's going on, you're getting a feel for what's going on in this second part, that was done quite well. And the conclusion, I think, was good as well. But there's a big chunk of middle in that second part, and that's not very good. It feels a bit cartoonish in a way. The author's bringing in different elements into the story that don't fit really in the first part of the story. And the characters that are formed or created for the second part of the story, they're just really cartoonish in my opinion. They come across as just awkward characters. They don't feel real. They just feel very forced, very convoluted, and everything about this second part in that big chunk in the middle just feels a bit off to me. I don't really get a sense of much from it, apart from just wanting to get through it. It didn't increase the fear and tension. It didn't make me anxious reading it. I thought it was just a very poor way to continue on from that amazing first part of the book. The conclusion of the whole book, so the very end, I liked. It brought back the atmosphere from the first part of the story. It really brought it back, and it didn't save the book overall, didn't make the book amazing overall, because you do recall still, when you're reading it, that big chunk in the South of Heaven section where it just feels off with those cartoonish characters. But I did like the ending. I thought the ending was really good. And bringing back that atmosphere is a bit of a saving grace, but not a total saving grace for the story. But overall, I did enjoy the story. I thought it was a good horror novel. There are fantastic horror elements, but mainly in the first part of the story. And they're quite chilling. You get a shiver up your spine when you're reading it, and you just want to know what's out there. For creating fear and creating suspense and tension and anxiety based on an unknown, I think is very difficult for an author to do. But this author did that in the first section very well. Dom, who's one of the four friends in the first part of the story, look, he's a very good character, written very well, as are all those main characters in the first part of the story. That's down to their flaws. All their flaws make them feel very human. And Dom has big flaws. So he's very sarcastic. He's very cruel sometimes in his comments. And he brings that into his dialogue when he feels threatened. When he's under threat, when he's feeling pressured, when he's feeling fearful, he falls back to sarcasm and hurtful comments to his friends. And you do get people like that in real life, don't you? So he feels very real, very human, and it's very consistent in the book. And his character is just created very well. He's got a good backstory as well. All the main characters have a good backstory, those 4 friends, and that makes them feel human as well. And I think the author took some really good care in crafting these characters, making sure they had a backstory, making sure that backstory really matched to who they are now in the present day when they're hiking through those woods. Everything matched, everything made sense. Hutch, who's another of the 4 friends, he's very real as well, and he comes across as the peacekeeper, the one who sits on the fence a lot and tries to mend all the bridges that are almost broken with the 4 friends, because there's a lot of tension in this book, in that section, a lot of anger and a lot of hurtful things being thrown around. And Hutch sits there and tries to bridge those gaps, mend those fences, build those bridges again. He's also a character that likes to be in control, it seems. He's got the map, and he doesn't seem to like other people to look at the map. He's always got it on him. And that's interesting as well. I'm just wondering if that's his flaw, wanting to be in control. And it's that wanting to be in control that leads everybody into danger, because he's the one who decides to go on the shortcut off trail. He convinces everybody else to do it. So that flaw of Hutch is the one that leads them into this whole danger in this story. So it makes him feel very real as well. Luke, another of the 4 friends, he's very real and is down to his flaws as well again. So all his flaws are consistent, and I like his introspection in this book. We get more about his thoughts in this first section than the other 3 characters, and his thoughts come through very true. They're very consistent. They match where he is as a character in his life. They match his past, but you get a very interesting flow of his thoughts because they switch a lot, but they switch consistently. He seems a bit confused. He seems a bit unsure of where he is at the moment in his life, but it's all consistent through that section in the book. So he's another good character, very human. All his actions feel so human, so real. They're not forced. They all feel so organic and just real for the character. Everything just feels real for the scenario they're in as well. Their setting heightens their emotions, heightens everything they're thinking, what they're saying, what they're doing, and that comes across with Luke as well in the story. So everything he does and says, you can believe, based on the setting, based on his past, based on how he thinks of himself, because you get a lot of that with him as well, how he thinks of himself, and what he thinks of his 3 friends when they're walking through these woods. Overall, I'm glad I read this story, and I'm glad it was recommended to me. It's not an author I've read before, and this author has a few books under his belt, so I do want to go and read as much as I can in his catalogue. But I'm glad I read this one, and now I will go and watch the movie, and I'm wondering, will the movie be, a direct match to the book? Will anything be changed? I'm curious to see what the movie's like. I rate this a 3.5 out of 5. The first part of this book, the first half, is brilliant. It's amazing. The atmosphere, the tension, the anxiety, the fear, everything's going on in that book. Just the characters, the way they're created, the way they interact with each other, everything feels so real. You feel like you're there. The second half, not so much. I don't really feel like I'm there all the time, like everything's real. Parts of it feel a bit cartoonish, but the conclusion is really good. I enjoy that conclusion very much. So overall, it's a book that's far better than average, but it's not a perfect book. On my channel, I do review a lot of horror books. If you don't want to miss out on those videos, check out my channel and subscribe. There's also a horror playlist on my channel. It should be on your screen now.